Hey, everybody. Welcome back to Old Dudes and New Tricks. I'm glad that you guys could join us again. Um, I'm on here with Gary and a friend of his, David Sean. And over the last 3 months, I've had a big body transformation. I've used Gary's program, worked out with some online videos, and had really good results. But some of the problems with that was I wanted to lose some weight, but not as much weight as I've lost. So I'm 6 foot tall. I started at about 170 and I'm down to 156. So I've lost all this weight. So
You're at 156 pounds? Holy,
156 pounds. That's what I weighed coming out of boot camp.
you're a waif.
Yeah, I know. So I told Gary, I said, I really like how my body's transformed and how I'm starting to look, but I don't like being this absolute thin, and I want to put on some more muscle mass. So he said, I've got a friend of mine, David Sean. He's an online body transformation coach, and I think he'd be somebody great to talk to and see if we can get some answers there. So David, thank you very much for joining us on the show, and welcome.
Yeah, thanks. I'm excited. Yeah, we can talk about some metabolism and nutrition and, whatever you guys want to talk about today, but excited to be here.
Well, yeah, and I think what you'll notice, because David's a little bit younger than us, you're in your mid-30s, correct, Dave?
Yep.
So as you're getting older, what happens, and I've noticed this too, because I get asked this a lot, the same problem, and I deal with it, is when I leaning down now, if I get off track or whatever, it's hard for me to maintain the muscle mass as I lean down as I'm older because I have lower testosterone levels. So I can't maintain the muscle mass like I used to be able to do. So if people get caught in this quandrum as they get older, they're like, okay, I want to get lean. I want to drop this excess weight. Problem is they're dropped too much muscle mass in the process. And then they're like, crap, okay, now I'm too thin. How do I bulk up? And I think that's a really big topic that our listeners would find interesting, is if you could tell them once you've dropped the initial weight and you've got the body fat down and you're at that body fat composition you're comfortable with, what is the best way to add the muscle mass back on?
Well, so I got a study I can talk about just for some of maybe the science nerds that want to hear that, and then we can talk about some of the practical stuff. But let's start with one newbie mistake and one sort of advanced training type of mistake. But one thing I will say, Gary, is I would guess that because we've talked about some of your joint issues and like spine injuries you've had, as people get older, if your listeners, they probably know what sarcopenia is, but for those that don't, it's just age-related muscle loss. And so the previous belief kind of a generation or two ago is that as we get older, we just have to sort of accept that our metabolism is going to go down, meaning BMR, our basal metabolic rate, just how many calories you're burning at rest. And really what studies are showing are that it's not so much the fact that we're going to just get metabolically worse. It's actually the fact that we just lose muscle. So theoretically, if a person could maintain the muscle mass they had when they were younger and ideally build on it, that basal metabolic rate is going to slowly build throughout your life to a point. And where people sort of miss out is they miss out on that opportunity over a lifetime to accrue new proteins. So the more lean muscle tissue you have, the higher your basal metabolic rate is going to be. So adding those proteins over the course of a lifetime is really the best way to look at it. But when someone has already leaned down, like what you were talking about, Dwayne, one mistake people make there is that as you start leaning down, like let's say you were taking in 2,000 calories a day and you were burning 2,000 a day. And then maybe you cut it to 1,800 and then you went here. You may have been tracking it and you may not have, but if you lost that weight, you were taking in less calories. So as your calories go down, your metabolism will follow that. So people cut down from 2,000 down to 1,700, metabolism follows. They cut down again and it follows again. And then what happens at that point, people cut down to maybe 1,500, right? And metabolism follows in 1,400. Well, where are you going to go from there? Can't just cut down to 1,200 and then go 900, then go 500, and then it's an eating disorder. So what happens is before people go straight up, eating disorder level, because metabolism is going down, they'll kind of sense like, I need to start eating more. And then they get in a calorie surplus because their metabolism downregulated over time. So what you really want to do is work with your metabolism. So in the state that you're in, you've reduced calories and you've lost some fat. And I'm sure you're doing strength training, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So you've lost some fat. So your basal metabolic rate most likely unless you've had a recent, newbie gains type of muscle gain, your basal metabolic rate is probably a little bit lower. And that's not a bad thing, because as you get leaner, that will happen. We'll kind of go down with it. But what I'd do right now, if I was you, would be to start implementing big refeed meals, maybe once a week. So, like, for instance, do you know what your calories are right now?
No, I'm not really sure. I kind of used a canister system, something, just to basically, and the goal was to lose that fat,
right?
Because there was a lot of fat. So I do know that I did cut my calories to make that happen.
Right. And so those numbers, that's just kind of for example, but in a sense, that's probably what happened. Because if you're in good fat burning mode, like you've obviously been, that means you were probably in a 300 to 500 calorie per day deficit.
Mm-hmm.
So your metabolism may have downregulated a little bit, but you don't want that to continue to happen. So what I would do is find the body fat percentage that you think you want to kind of stay at. And once you get there, then you can kind of evaluate where you want to be. Like, are you trying to continue to lose fat, or are you trying to just kind of maintain and kind of slowly build muscle back up? Or
yeah, I kind of want to build muscle back up, because I've gotten lean, and except for a little bit around the waist, I mean, I really like where the physique I am for a 46-year-old guy, man. I'm really happy with where my physique is. So I definitely want to start building some more muscle to fill that frame out a little bit.
Gotcha. Well, and so this is, let's say there's 3 levels of training, like beginner, intermediate, and advanced. And Gary and I have talked about this. Gary knows how to lean down without necessarily counting the calories, but he has really good biofeedback and knows a lot more about science than most people. So that works really well for him. And I've done actual physique shows where I did not count my macros. I went off biofeedback. But if someone is kind of at that beginner stage, and then, they kind of build their muscles up, and then they get to where they're intermediate, and then they're kind of running into some plateaus, that's the point where you have to just start doing more and more particular things to fight for those extra gains, because you're out of that newbie gains mode, which just means when you haven't lifted weights before, if you're in a calorie surplus and you're lifting heavy, you can inhale and gain muscle, but that slows down. So what I would recommend for you is I would dial into training and get on a specific strength training program, which I don't know what you're doing, but I would also start actually tracking calories to make sure you stay in that surplus, just like 300 to 500 a day. So let's actually, this is a good time to kind of talk about this, and we'll just do a little bit of science nerd stuff real quick. But there was a study by the Journal of Sports Medicine and Physical Fitness where they did untrained subjects combine resistance training with a 2,000 calorie surplus per day. So if they were burning 1,500, they would have been taking in like 3,500. So big calorie surplus. And these untrained subjects, even in this big calorie surplus, because they were in that newbie gains mode, because it takes a lot of energy to put those new tissues on your body, the new muscle, they were in a 2,000 calorie surplus for 8 weeks and barely gained any fat at all.
Wow.
So people underestimate when it's actually time to really systematically start muscle during that process of putting the bricks together. It takes a lot of energy to put those bricks together. And then once those bricks are in place, meaning the new structural proteins, your metabolism is going to be higher just holding that muscle on. So big calorie surplus, no fat gain. Now that's a newbie mistake, is often people, newbies or even kind of intermediate level, don't get enough of a calorie surplus to really put that tissue on so their metabolism, grows over time. But they did another study with elite athletes in a 2,000 calorie surplus that were more advanced in terms of their muscularity, and they actually gained fat in a 2,000 calorie surplus per day. So the point being is people kind of get down the road and they start, it might be in the phase that you're in and you're wanting to get some more muscle going. And what people often do then is, as the muscle tissue increases over the years, I don't know how long you've been lifting, a lot of times they'll kind of revert back to the time period when they were in college and they could just eat whatever they want and, not gain weight. And they'll be like, well, went back in the time when I gained a bunch of muscle back in the day, here's how I did it, this big surplus. So beginners or close to that intermediate level often don't get enough calories when it's time to build. And people that are more advanced that are fighting for those incremental gains often get a little bit too much. So there's certain points where you're going to have to actually get specific with calorie intakes and stuff like that. And that's where you can just, I don't know if we want to go into tracking macros and all that, but whatever route we want to go down.
Yeah, well, there's, and you're right. This is a big mistake most people make during weight loss. Is the philosophy is, and this is permeated throughout all the industry, is that you have to be in a calorie deficit in order to lose weight. And that is correct and incorrect at the same time, because your body's metabolism, and I've had to explain this to even experts, I go, it's not set. Your metabolism will shift throughout the day. It is always moving. Your metabolism is not set. It's said and they've said that, oh, you could reset your metabolism. Well, your metabolism is technically never really set. It moves. It moves to the stresses.
Yeah, you can't just quantify it and compartmentalize.
No.
Like, here's the 3 things that will contribute to how many calories. There are 4 main sources, but within that, there's so many ways we burn calories, so many ways that hormones can fluctuate.
And a calorie is not a calorie. So people go into weight loss mode, they cut the calories, but they don't focus on their diet. So say you want to lose weight and gain muscle. Well, your macros are going to have to represent that. So that means technically, like Dave just said, you're going to have to be in a surplus of some sort. And it's going to be more likely in the protein category, because you need amino acids in order to build building blocks for muscle. So you have to have more protein. So your diet has to correspond to that. And that's where I say it gets tricky, because I try and teach things in balance through the nutrition side. Because I say, okay, if you're trying to put on muscle yet lose weight, you're going to drop your carbs down, obviously. So you're going to go into a low carb setting for a little bit, 2 to 3 weeks max. You don't want to do it too long, because then your metabolism will down regulate, catching that you're on a carbohydrate deficit, basically a glucose deficit. So now it's going to re-alter itself, and our energy systems are clicking in all the time. Because you hear these keto people now, because keto is big. And I just I'm going to be releasing a little blurb I did for a podcast on exogenous ketones and how big a bullshit they are and why they don't work. And now they're real popular because people think they can trick the body. But a lot of people who talk about ketosis and using and going in,
between small ball and total bullshit.
Yeah. And I tell people for ketosis, going into a ketogenic diet, well, your body does that anyway. What you're doing is you're forcing it to burn fat primarily, but again, for a short period of time, because what your body will do, the only time your body primarily relies on fat as its only energy source primarily is during starvation. Now, there are some cultures that are Arctic or polar cultures that are in very cold temperatures that have a high-fat diet anyway. Well, they've had hundreds of thousands of years. Their body adapts this. Their the way they digest food and the way their enzymes work inside their body are different than someone from, say, the Mediterranean, someone from, South America. Totally different. Our bodies adapt to our diets and our climates, our, bacteria we're exposed to. There's so many different factors. Yeah. I tell people, follow your body. You got to change the calories you're eating. So you can eat 2,000 calories of a healthy diet that I teach, a primal diet, or you can eat 2,000 calories of a standard American diet, and I can exercise you the exact same way, and we're going to have 2 very different results. The person eating
I thought you were going to mention the Twinkies. You know about that, right?
Yeah. I actually did an article on that years ago about the Twinkie study, which was total bullshit again. The way the guy,
What's funny is you eat in a calorie deficit. You're eating less than you burn that day. You can actually lose weight eating Twinkies, but you take someone who's on the Primal Power Method type diet with its whole foods. Both of them will lose weight in a calorie deficit, but the body composition is going to be a much different story.
Way different. Well, and another example I give is I could get 2 identical twins, and I could feed them the exact same diet and exercise them exactly right next to each other, doing the exact same thing. They would have different results, even though they're identical twins. Just the way it is. Everyone is different. But this is a good one, because aging guys do this a lot, and women, is they go straight to the calorie restriction diet. And you'll lose weight, but you better be paying real good attention to what you're putting in your body at that time. You better be eating clean. You better be eating a good balance of macros to your exercise level. Your body will tell you, if you're having a hard time sleeping, you're bonking, low energy, you better get some more carbs in there. Healthy carbs. I'm not talking going out in a bag of potato chips or go eat 3 bagels. It's going to be in the form of sweet potato, you know, that's probably the best one. Even oatmeal. I mean, people are going to cringe that Gary just said oatmeal is a primal guy. But if you could tolerate that oatmeal and oats and a grain, you're fine. I totally believe in that. It's been in bodybuilding forever. It's a quick energy source. Well, it's quick but slow. It's a slower digesting carbohydrate. You want slow burning carbohydrates. You don't want fast. So, you know, we got into a real complicated subject there, but I think David hit it on the head. It's not just calorie deficit, because your body will adapt to that calorie deficit and start down regulating your metabolism. So you can do it I always say, what do you do with your clients, Dave? I give them 2 to 3 weeks. You've got 2 to 3 weeks to screw with it. Then you got to bounce out of it, and you got to adjust back, or your metabolism is going to down regulate so much that you're going to have, they call it the yo-yo effect. It's where you go like this, and all of a sudden you're eating the same amount of calories, or you're dropping them, and all of a sudden your body weight start going up again, because your metabolism, you've gone into starvation mode, and your body's saying, I need to hunker down. I'm in survival mode, and I'm going to store every calorie I can get. And what it does is it shuts down reproduction. This is the thing that most people freak out. I go, the first thing your body shuts down when it thinks it's hitting starvation mode or going into it is reproduction mode.
Why would you have a bunch of babies?
Exactly.
Right. So it's interesting, and I know that your audience isn't necessarily like, you know, doesn't come from the world of physique or fitness competition, but like they might find this interesting, is that I've observed and had clients, I've seen this, that bodybuilders, physique guys, even bikini competitors, sex drive 4 to 6 weeks out, you know, going up to the show and body fat gets that low, is really not too high. And while that's not necessarily like, we don't necessarily need to talk about competition, you see a lot of people mimic that in real life. So Dwayne, it sounds like you probably started out with a, you know, pretty good metabolism. You're cutting now, but a lot of people get to where you're at and they go, you know what, I got a 4-pack, or I don't know what you got, but I know I want to get a 6-pack. So they just keep moving those calories down, and that's where they get in trouble.
Yeah, because what I've been thinking is, you know, like I said, I'm down to where that's pretty much the last area that I feel like I really need to work, because I would love, my goal is I would love to have a 6-pack at 47. I think that would be so awesome. But I know that now it's pulling that muscle out. You know, it's not necessarily losing the fat, but I have to put muscle behind there to stretch that area out, if that makes sense.
Well, here's what I would do if I was you, and I don't know if you want me to speak specifically on your case, just to sort of give people a reference, but like, if I was you, without knowing all of your goals, I would go to the point of getting like about as lean as you want to get, and just realize that, and let's see, it's April, and where do you live?
I live in Kentucky, in Lexington.
Cool. So it's going to start getting warmer, you know, and you're going to, maybe when the sun's out, maybe you're going to be out on the boat or something, or at the lake or something, or at the pool. That's when it's a good time to be lean. So I'd get lean and try to maintain that leanness for no longer than 12 to 16 weeks. And then once it starts getting cold again, I would actually go back into a surplus and build. And then when you cut, and Gary and I talked about this before on another, then when you start cutting again, because you went through an actual building phase where you were in a surplus on purpose, if you do that, you'll have a higher metabolism at the beginning of your next cut phase, and you'll get even leaner next year.
Oh,
so
okay.
What's funny is you do have to be in a calorie deficit to lose fat. That's true, but there's a lot more that goes into making sure your metabolism's still healthy. But the first time someone tries to lean out, it doesn't work as well as the second time a lot of times. So what I see is people kind of lean out and they'll be like, okay, I got some abs, and it's like, but I can't really reduce any further. So let's go back to the lab. Let's put on some muscle. And then what people don't really consider enough, and I don't hear anyone talk about this, is what's going to determine how lean you can get and how ripped you can get is not just the calorie deficit and the perfect workout, but let's say you're doing a 12 to 16 week time period of, you know, actively cutting. Yeah. Where your metabolism is at the beginning of the actual cut phase, if you got a solid, strong metabolism, you'll be able to cut and get that body fat down. But if your metabolism sucks at the beginning of a cut phase, then you're not going to cut that well. So let's say your metabolism was not crazy high, but not crazy low, but maybe like just kind of medium, and now you're cutting. Well, your basal metabolic rate might go down a little bit, but hey, insulin sensitivity is going to go up. So when you go back into a building phase, now it's going to be easier to grow. So there's honestly, as long as you know what you're doing and you're doing cutting or building, or maintenance at the end of a cutting phase, as long as you have something in your head where you're mapping this out and you're not caught in no man's land of I'm kind of dieting but unhappy, as long as you can map this out, there's benefits to the cutting for your metabolism, and then there's benefits to systematically building back up. But as long as you can cyclically kind of do that each year and build your metabolism, you can do that until you're in your 60s and 70s and continue. Joints start to wear out, so we can't do it forever. I know Gary's going to do it till he's 100, but most of us are human, right?
Well, and that's kind of where what I've learned, because I thought, man, I'm getting older. I've never been lean and cut up or anything like that, but I've always been thin. I've got up to 200 pounds before, just by not doing anything and just eating like crap. But I'm amazed. I was amazed how easy it was, even at 46, to drop that weight, get lean, and start having muscles again. So I thought that was a misconception I had. And I think a lot of people, since this is the Old Dudes podcast, I'm sure there's a lot of people listening right now that are in that phase. Maybe they've got 30 pounds of extra weight and they're like, well, man, now I'm 50 years old. There's no way in hell I'm ever going to get this off. What can you tell them to convince them, hey, it's just starting and getting on a program?
Yeah, well, so what people need to focus on is just protein synthesis is one of the most important things, and that means just growing new muscle tissue. So if we're talking about metabolism and calorie numbers, some people go, oh, I don't want all that, and others are like, well, maybe it is time for me to track this I recommend tracking it at some point in your life and knowing where's your high end of your metabolic threshold, where's your low end, now you got some starting points. But if you don't want to do that, really the best thing you can do is just focus on building actual muscle. And what that means is that most of the studies show that we need 3 to 4 protein feedings per day to maximize protein synthesis. So we don't have to eat like 5 to 6 small meals. Really what you can do is to maximize protein synthesis. As long as you get 20 to 25 grams per serving, you're going to maximize protein synthesis for that serving, and you have to hit about 1.5 to 2 grams of leucine to maximize it within that feeding. So if you're doing that 4 times a day, then that would only be 80 grams of protein. So I'm not saying get 80 grams of protein. I'd get 0.8 to maybe 1.1 grams of protein per pound of body weight, depending on body fat, percentage, of course. But I'd get that. So the way I do it is I get protein 4 times a day, and I make sure I hit my minimum, and I make sure that each serving has 20 to 25 grams, and I take an amino complex every day. So as long as you're feeding that protein synthesis, you can gain new muscle tissue. But you also have to have the stimulus, and that's where the workout comes from. But all this is in the name of building the metabolism. So in my opinion, the first thing people should ask themselves is, what I'm doing? What is it doing to serve and build my metabolism over time? So I would just have a plan. So when you're at that stage that you're at, some people go calories lower and lower and lower. And, you should just sort of know in your head that you can pull them down probably a little lower, get a little leaner, but just don't try to stay there forever, because if you do, the fat's going to come back on just because, you'll get hormone dysregulation and stuff like that. So it's all about building that metabolism. And I like how Gary talks about this because, some people just want to stick to the numbers and the metabolism, all that. But Gary has had a good parallel for why we should cyclically add a little bit of fat each year. So I do about 1 to 2 physique shows a year, but each, during the winter, I try to put a little fat on because I went a year and a half being pretty much photo shoot ready almost all the time. And there was a certain point where it didn't matter how determined I was. It didn't matter how much more weight I lifted. I'm sitting there going, man, something is not right. I'm trying to get stronger and I can't. My energy levels are down. And I'm like, but I want to be ready for the camera. So there was this photographer. I actually had to turn down a big opportunity because I was like her main guy, and we were progressing with this project. It was a big company, like a nationwide thing. And finally, there was like 4 things going on in my life, and I had to call her up and say, hey, I can't stay photo shoot ready all the time like this. I've been this way for a year and a half. It's not doing my metabolism any good. So I've seen it. I've already seen what can happen at the age of, when was that? That was about 4 years ago. I was about 31. So as you get older, it just gets a little bit tougher. So you want to think about changes being subtle but cumulative over time. Continue to add those proteins every day to your body, add more lean muscle tissue. And so all these changes, the difference between someone in 10 years that has a skinny fat body compared to someone who's lean and strong in 10 years, the one who's lean and strong they were doing something to systematically build their metabolism over the years. Sometimes people have great genetics, that's true. But usually if I talk to someone that's 50 years old and they're nice and lean, they might not even know all the science behind this, but you see signs of this show up when they talk about what they do. You know, they're not fitness or health experts, maybe they know nothing, but they started out by being good at listening to biofeedback.
Well, not only that, those are some really good points. And the way I look at it, I do have a technical side that I get into, but I like to keep it more on the human being side. We're an animal.
Yeah, Gary's the science and the practical guy, so I don't want that to get lost on what I'm saying, but yeah, he's good with analogies for sure.
Well, and you need a balance. I'm more of a guy by feel. I'm a big feel guy, but I have enough of a science background where I understand what I'm doing. So it'll look like it's totally effortless, but it's an accumulation of decades of experience with my own body too, and then working with others. But Dave brought up a really good point. As humans, we're cyclical in the way we store fat, the way we burn fat, lean, as opposed to bulking up. It's just like a bear for hibernation. If you're a human and you were in a climate that had multiple seasons, that you would go through a winter, you would have to store up because there wouldn't be, you're going to be dealing with cold. So your metabolism is going to burn more calories in that cold weather, and you're going to be exercising because you're going to have to hunt still because there are no plants left really to eat from. You could dig up some roots and stuff, but animal protein is going to be your main source during the winter, usually in cold climates. So you're burning more calories. So you're trying to bulk up. You'd see that a lot of cultures that they would actually bulk up before winter, because there's a good chance too, if there's if there was a disease that hit, if there wasn't as much animal life, if they moved to a different area. Because remember, we were nomadic. We moved towards to stay because we would hunt out an area. We had to be nomadic and move to where the prey was, so we could continue to cycle. And we were smart enough to know that if we hunted out an area, well, that's it. We just killed everything in that area. You want it to replenish so you can go move around, come back. But in nature, there's bad seasons. There's seasons, and humans were well aware of this. All of a sudden, there's no deer, there's no elk, there's no bison, not as much. Or they're in an area that could have gotten hit by disease. Well, we would bulk up for winter just in case starvation was a very good probability. So humans naturally are geared towards bulking, losing up and down, but not shooting straight up to 350 pounds on a scooter at Walmart to, competing at 150 pounds in a bodybuilding competition. I mean, we do the extremes in America, unfortunately. We're meant to move, comfortably. I would say a range of 5 to 10 pounds on average, depending on your size. Mine's a 5-pounder. Mine's a 3 to 5 pound threshold, but I'm a smaller guy, even though me and Dwayne almost weigh the same right now. He's not too far off from me, but I'm a half foot shorter than him. I'm only 5'6". Yeah. So understanding that and kind of letting your body find its way. And I'll tell you this right now, people freak out about this and they try and force their metabolism to speed up really high in the winter. And you're almost fighting yourself sometimes, because naturally your metabolism will actually slow down in winter. They've done studies on this, that we will go down into hunker survival mode in a colder climate. The only time it goes up, and hunters know this, I'm talking two different varieties now. I'm talking the sedentary American versus the hunter-gatherer. Now, the hunter-gatherer could kick that metabolism up because they were out trudging through snow, climbing mountains, hills, burning more calories to stay warm. Well, that would upregulate their metabolism. But for Americans in a cold climate not experiencing that, guess what their metabolism does? It just dives. It just slows down. It doesn't speed up because you're not doing anything.
Well, and here's what's interesting is that when you read the studies on this stuff, when you talk about, metabolism slowing down and, hey, it's winter, we're going to accumulate a little bit of fat, not so much fat that it puts hormone dysregulation and insulin problem, but just enough, because fat is like a little hormone factory. Do you want testosterone? I mean, so what's interesting is in the studies, when metabolism is slower, they call it being more energy efficient, right? So when we hear metabolism slowing down in our culture, it's like, oh no, that's a bad thing. And it's like, well, but here's the thing. When it slows down in the winter, that's to our advantage, like we're talking about.
Absolutely.
So what we need to do is roll with our metabolism and understand that it's not about higher or lower is better. It's about, let's just roll with it. That's a good time to put some muscle mass on, you know, if your metabolism's a little bit slower, but don't get in too much of a calorie surplus.
Well, and they're burning a lot of calories. I should take that back. It depends. Again, what they're eating, where they're at, what part of the world. But their metabolism could be speeding up with the increased exercise and the harder ability to go get game and hunt. But at the same time, it could be slowed down, but they're burning more calories because their body's saying, hey, I need to store a fat layer. It's cold out here. It's weird. The human body is incredibly complicated in the way it works. And we always think we can hack this, we can hack that. I always talk about this. You aren't hacking shit with your body. Your body, you start trying to hack stuff and your body's going to throw you for a loop. Your body is programmed a certain way. You can tweak it here and there and you can play with things, but the smart way to do it is to play within your own body. No one knows your body better than you. Dwayne, you're a lean guy. So for you to add a lot of muscle is probably not in the cards. Now, that is not to say that you cannot be muscular. Mm-hmm. You can be muscular, but certain people are naturally and genetically lean muscle type. You know, it's just the way it is. You don't always hear these short, squatty guys, right? They come out of the womb and they're just little spark plugs. They're like pit bulls, you know? And they're built that way, and they lift a weight and they instantly blow up. They put on muscle mass. Then there's people who come out, they're lean. They're more, they're better at long distance endurance cardio, different body types. So you play within that. You know, I'm in between. I'm a guy, even though I'm short, I've got a little bit of that spark plug in me, and I've got a little bit of that lean in me because of the variation of the genetics in my family. I've got two sides. I've got the short, squatty people, and then I've got the lean, taller people. So I ended up right in the middle of that.
You didn't get any of the height, though.
I got zero height. Believe it or not, people laugh. I'm one of the tallest people in my family. On one side. Like, one side is tall. Actually, yeah, my one side looks like you, Dwayne. They're taller, leaner. And then one side is short and squatty. And my short and squatty side, I'm actually tall. My grandmother.
You with them more, don't you?
I did, but they're all passed away, unfortunately. All I'm left with, I think, are the tall people now. And my grandmother, 5 foot tall. You know, everyone was short. My grandfather, I think he was 5'4", 5'5". You know, so that's just the way it went. But I play within that. I know my body, and I know I can add muscle differently than someone who's tall and lean. Because I'll watch people watch me work out, and he's all, hey, I'd like to teach me some stuff. I like what you're doing. I'm all, you're not going to be able to do the stuff I'm doing. You're going to have to switch it to your body type a little bit more. You know, it's all variation, and how to learn that is the basics, though. If you want to put on muscle mass, real obvious, you got to lift heavier objects.
Yeah.
If you're going to go out and run 5 miles and then, think you're going to do some aerobics and put on some muscle, a little bit, but it's all going to be endurance, lean muscle. It's going to be a totally different type. You know, you got fast twitch, slow twitch without getting into all that, but just understanding that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so like what's interesting is if you're talking about that sort of like not big frame, but more of a leaner frame, you know, you got the ectomorph body type, the mesomorph, like the guys who are NFL running backs, and you got the endomorphs.
Yep.
People are a little bit thicker. They got a good amount of muscle, but they also got a good amount of fat too. So there's a few different basic body types, and then we're all sort of a combination of those. But with ectomorphs, kind of the curse is the guys who might have a little more trouble putting on muscle like Dwayne. Like, it's easy for him to be leaner, but it's harder for him to put on muscle. And Gary, I think you're probably ectomorph body type, but that's what a lot of like actual fitness models, they're ectomorph body types that sort of kind of morph themselves into, you know, more of the mesomorph type as time goes on. But what ectomorphs tend to do, guys that aren't huge, is they're like, man, I want to get like that big guy. And they often are the ones that are more adrenally wired just naturally. And that kind of pushes them into this pattern of wanting to lift just as heavy as guys that have bigger actual joints. And so the ectomorph who started out and said, I want to get like that big guy, and started really putting on that muscle, and I can do this as long as I add muscle over the years. Well, the ectomorph gets hurt, has a joint injury. And then once that happens, now it's tough to do resistance training, and now it's even harder to put on that muscle mass. So if you're an ectomorph, try not to go too crazy. Gary's done it when he was younger, because we've talked. I've done it. But really what you want to do, if you're an ectomorph, the best thing you can do is get on a program where instead of worrying about, do I have a six-pack today, or what's my body fat percentage today, make sure that month over month, year over year, that you're getting stronger. And there's a lot of ways to do that. But, you know, some of the 4 basic deadlifts like bench, squat, deadlift, overhead press, stuff like that, if you can systematically get stronger at those lifts, even if it's small increments year by year, and it won't be linear, it will, you know, fluctuate just like anything. But if you can systematically get stronger at the big lifts year after year, your metabolism is going to build, and you're going to be in a pretty good spot, unless the diet is horrible. But you just can't go wrong with getting stronger. That's you know, over time.
And that's basically where I am. And I think until recently, I've just gotten comfortable with my actual body type, you know, because especially in my 20s and early 30s, I thought that it was just, you could work yourself into, you know, this muscle mass. And, you know, I did it all wrong. And like I said, that's where I got hurt. That's why I have trouble with shoulder doing military press or anything like that above my head, is because I screwed my shoulders up trying to overdo that kind of stuff. So I think, you know, what you said there is key. You have to realize what your body type is and what your limitations are. And if you figure that out, then you can start working on where you want to go.
Yeah, and people kind of, if they hear like, oh shoot, am I an ectomorph body type? Does that mean I can't put on muscle? Like I'm classic ectomorph. I'm not big. I've got small joints. My muscle bellies compared to my joints are decently sized, but I'm straight up ectomorph. And pretty much for my whole life, I would outwork everybody in the weight room, and I basically looked like a guy who kind of works out. You know what I mean? And then it wasn't until I started actually doing physique competitions, which you could do that in like a lean cutting phase, like where you're at systematically. Well, once I peeled it all off and stepped on stage and I placed at my first show, and then a year after that, I had my pro card. So I didn't even know it was in me, because you can be like an ectomorph, have, you know, 15, 20 pounds of fat that's kind of around the midsection, and it's covering up like what is possibly like a really awesome looking streamlined physique. But until you peel down one time in your life, you don't even know. And I actually, it kind of sucks if you see someone working out their whole life and they never peel down at least once just to see what's going on under there, because that will take your motivation for the rest of your life to a whole new level. Because you can like picture it and go, okay, well, if I follow this, I did it once, I can do it again. What's really sad is when someone does it one time and they've already been kind of dieting for a while, and they go, okay, time to get super ripped. And then they just cut, and they're miserable. They take a picture and then hey, this is the leanest I ever was, but I'd never do it again because that was miserable. Well, if I hear that, I know that whoever did it at the beginning of that, let's say 12 to 16 week cutting phase, I know that their metabolism kind of wasn't really that robust at the beginning of that cutting phase. Because the people that properly build their metabolism up before they go, you know what, I'm going to dial it in, I'm going to really get lean, it's not as miserable for them. And so that will also help you hold it longer. So the better your metabolism is at the beginning of that cut phase, the longer you even be able to hold that leanness. So I don't know. And like I said, I don't know if your audience is even interested in tracking macros. I mean, you can go to davidshawn.co and it will kind of show you how to do this. It will, if you get on my newsletter. But really the thing is, focusing on protein synthesis and building muscle and strength over the years and being sensible with your diet will really take you a long ways. What I see, Gary, is, and especially like paleo, you know, I've interviewed and been interviewed by a lot of paleo people. They're looking for a hack, they're looking for nutrition tips, and they're doing all these things. But a lot of people are focusing on that little playing small ball, and they're not focusing on the stuff that's most important. And that is building metabolism over time by, you know, protein synthesis and adding strength, and eating what they really feel like is the most sensible diet, without eating a bunch of processed stuff, and being reasonable with it. You know, 4 protein feedings a day, get stronger. That really will take you a long way. And then if you want to finishing touches on, or you run into a plateau, we got science where we can say, here's what we got to do. Here's a protocol. We turn the dial. We get a result with the body. So if you're at that plateau, it'll be time to track calories, but you can go a long ways by adding muscle and strength.
Well, the problem today too is everyone thinks they're a professional athlete too, and everyone thinks they're an expert on athletes without ever doing it. So it gets really complicated. What I always tell people, don't overthink it. Don't go down too many rabbit holes. As humans, we have so much information available to us today. The biggest mistake I see clients make is they jump. They jump. They start one program, they do it for like 10 days, they go, okay, that's cool, but I read this article that tells me to do it this way. Then they jump off and they do it that way. And not to say the things that they're looking at are incorrect. It's just that it's consistency. And I tell people this all the time. You can't just jump around, start one thing, stop, do another. Your body, you're just screwing up your metabolism and you're screwing up your body. What you have to do is find what works for you. People think because I'm a primal guy and I mix in the paleo world a little bit here and there, that I'm against vegans and vegetarians. I go, absolutely not. I go, if you're a vegan or a vegetarian and you feel good, you like your life and you don't have any physical ailments because of your diet and your lifestyle, why would I tell you to change that?
Well, let's talk about vegan.
Yeah.
You want to do that for a second?
Yeah, go ahead.
So, here's the thing. I'm not for or against it, but if someone is going to choose to be a vegan, they shouldn't do that without doing some research first.
Yeah,
because
absolutely.
they screw themselves up. And where they run into trouble is when we're talking about protein synthesis, you got to hit 1.5, depending on body weight, to 2 grams of leucine, which is one of the branched chain amino acids. And if you don't hit that 1.5 to 2 grams of leucine per serving within that protein feeding, you're not going to maximize protein synthesis within that meal, meaning you lost your opportunity to get that precious muscle we've been talking about. So that's what happens is if you're eating meat, anybody who's a meat eater pretty much is going to get enough leucine or really close to enough leucine. But vegetarians have a tough time getting leucine because there's not that much of it in plants. And so even if what they really do is they eat a very high percentage of carbs, and then they don't get enough protein. But what I've seen, a lot of the ones, even if they do get enough protein, they don't hit their leucine thresholds. So if you're a vegan, here's what I'd say, and they're going to be creatine deficient as well. There's studies that show that vegans respond better to 12 weeks of resistance training with creatine than non-vegans, like crazy better, almost like you put them on, like, I don't want to say steroids, but it was way different because they were so deficient that it helped. So if someone wants to be a vegan, and I'm doubting many of your followers are, make sure you get 10 grams of leucine a day and 4 protein feedings a day, and get an essential amino acid blend and take that probably 3 to 5 grams.
Well, not only that, do your research. And what people find who get into the vegan lifestyle, vegetarian's a little bit different, there's so many different versions of a vegetarian, and I don't want to get into that. I actually go into my book and I describe each lacto-vegetarian, vegan. I go through all of them, and it gets really complicated. A vegan basically has no animal products and no animal flesh, period. So no eggs, no milk, no meat, no nothing. If it comes from an animal, they're not eating it, period. So with that, you can be a vegan, but people find it is very, very difficult. And if you don't have your act together, it could put you in a health crisis fairly quickly. You will become nutritionally deficient. You'll have all kinds of health issues pop up out of nowhere. So you have to be really, really careful. I just tell people, if you want to be a vegan, and I'm all for it, there are people who do not want to be involved in the killing of an animal. I totally get it. I understand that. Make sure you're getting your information from a real vegan, someone who understands. If a vegan is telling you they're doing it without supplementation of some sort, they're full of shit. They're eating meat. I'll guarantee it because I've caught them. I've caught these hardcore vegans, supposedly, and I'm with them, and they're eating a friggin' hamburger. And I'm all, dude, what gives? Oh, yeah, I eat meat. And you're like...
I have to tell this story, Gary.
Yeah, go ahead.
I've been going on a couple dates with a girl who's a vegan, and I do a big refeed day every Sunday. So I'm in a probably 300 to 500 calorie deficit each day, and then I do a really big refeed every Sunday is how I do it. And it keeps me pretty lean, and I don't feel deprived, and kind of that's how I roll. So when Sunday comes around, I really want to push that insulin out, push all those nutrients back into the muscle cells. So it's refeed time, and I get dirty with it. So my diet is pretty much on point 6 days a week, and then for about a 4 to 6 hour period every Sunday, it's no rules. And not that will work for everyone, but I was ready to really get that big refeed in, and we had to go to 2 different restaurants. because she had to get the vegan food, and I went to IHOP and ordered 2 chicken fried steak meals.
Oh my God. IHOP is just, it is human meth of food is what it is.
Terrible. This is on my refeed days. I feel like Gary's judging me right now.
No. I'm talking IHOP. If I go in there, I'm going to stuff myself till my belly pokes out. I mean, I can't stop.
Yeah, I got 2 chicken fried steak meals, and then and there was pancakes and eggs and hash browns with it, and an extra order of waffles, and then just
so much
butter on it. So that's my big calorie surplus today. But today I'm right back in a calorie deficit. And what's interesting is you can follow that system without tracking the macros per se, if you're doing it, or you can follow it systematically. But yeah, I thought you might think that's kind of funny. It was good timing right there. But I told her, I got her on some essential amino acids and creatine and all these different things. We had to have a little talk, like, all right, I didn't want to say anything because I don't want to tell you how to eat as a vegan. I respect your choice, but there's about 3 things you need to do or you're going down the wrong path. And she was like, okay, I'll do it. And she went out and got the supplements and started taking them. But what's interesting is, and I've never seen studies about this, she was definitely creatine deficient. She said that she actually, first time she took creatine, she said she literally felt like almost like a brain high, and her workouts were better. So you guys eat meat, I eat meat. I don't know. I know Gary does. Dwayne, I don't know if you do. You've got enough creatine probably in your body. You might be able to get a little bit more optimal with supplementation, but you got close to enough. When a vegan starts doing it, their body just lights up and they get way stronger. What's interesting is creatine will hold water under the skin in some people, and she held way more water in her face than I've ever seen anyone start taking creatine and hold. And she's like, what's going on? And I said, here's the deal. It's that classic situation where there's no clinical trials to tell what happened. I said, but I can speculate. I think you were very, very creatine deficient for 2 to 3 years now. And as soon as your body got some, it said, you know what? Let's load up while we can.
Yep.
So, I don't know that vegan is necessarily something we want to spend too much time talking about because.
Well, no, I think it's good information though, because it is a hot topic and people ask me about that all the time. And again, like I said, they think I'm just this total dogmatic paleo primal, just, whipping the chains. I'm all, no. I am not that way. I teach that, and I teach that lifestyle because I have found for the majority of people, it does work, but it's been proven too, about 5 to 10% of the population cannot do the paleo diet. Mm-hmm. It does not work for them. They have a ton of problems. That's just the way it is. I just pick things that I feel work for the majority of people that work for me. But even with that, I tweak my stuff. I'm a primal guy. I used to be able to do dairy once I switched to organic and raw. Well, guess what? Over the years, again, that's changed. I've gotten older, and as you age, you have a harder time with protein synthesis. You have a harder time digesting protein and breaking it down because you start losing the stomach acid, which is key to breaking down protein. That just happens with age, and I'm starting to catch that. So what happens with me too is I eat less. I am finding I'm eating less as I age because I cannot do it. I'll try and do the force feed and I get sick. I mean, I'm bloated. I'm like, oh, this was stupid. And the thing is, I won't eat for the rest of the day because I'm so bloated. When I was young, I could eat that way in the morning, and by noon, I'm like, oh, look, let's do it again. I could eat double the calories I can eat now in the same food. I mean, in healthy food. Right. So what it does is things change. And I just like to tell people that, just keep an open mind. And that's why I like Dave. Even though we're both in the fitness world, Dave has a different teaching model than I do. His is more technical. More hands-on, people looking to add muscle too. Mine's more of, hey, you've screwed your body up for 40 years. Here's how you restart. Here's how you eat. Here's how you get on track. And I don't consider myself, what I do in my life is advanced, would be considered advanced, but I don't teach an advanced concept because it's too time consuming and too confusing for me to go A to Z to the extreme, going from trying to be healthy to being a competitive bodybuilder or athlete. I do work with athletes, but one-on-one, for me to write about all that and do that, it would screw people up so bad. That's why I like specialists to deal with that. And that's what Dave does. He's a specialist. He's a guy you go, all right, I want to put on muscle. I want to compete in competition and in fitness competitions, I want to, or even just to be healthier. That's Dave. I'm more of a generalist. I'm more of a guy to give you a concept to build upon, teach you the nuts and bolts in an easy way. That's what I like about this world. Everyone does it a little bit differently, and there's no reason you couldn't come to me and then go to Dave, come to me. I mean, it just depends what your goals are. No one's going to teach it all. And I would never go to someone who says they teach it all. I wouldn't go someone says, oh yeah, I've got, I can teach you. Not only that, I'm an herbalist on the side. I'll teach you about all the herbs, and then I'm going to teach you how to bodybuild. Oh, and by the way, I know how to lose weight. Oh, and then I can teach you how to run endurance. You don't want to go to that person because they're an expert at nothing. Basically, you got to take as doing this in the health world, you got to take a piece of it and specialize in it. And you could be broad, but you could be too broad. You could get way too far out there in the weeds. And it's, what is your goal? What is your goal at that time? That's the person you need to go to. I'm the guy you start with. I always tell people that. I'm the guy you could start with. I'm the perfect person if you've never worked out, you've never eaten healthy, you have no clue, you never played a sport. I'm the guy that can get you going. Even though I've played sports, teach athletes, I can get you going into the way, and I can get you to a pretty good level. But once you want to take it to that extra notch and take it into a whole nother realm, that's where people like Dave come in. That's why I say, hey, use the person to a specific point. Then if your goals change, go find them. Not say I don't train. I train athletes one-on-one though. That's a totally different side of my business that's outside of my books and my basic teachings. That's something I bring a person in for one-on-one.
Well, let's start to wrap this puppy up here, and just kind of, when somebody watches this, and I'd say, most people are watching this probably have in their head, man, I want to get in better shape. But both of you guys, somebody that just said, I need that starting point. What would you say, both of you guys, where would you start from, like, today? Like, I want to do this. Where would they start?
You go, Gary. And then I'll go.
As far as information or just basic?
Just to motivate them to say, all right, I want to do this today.
The easiest way for me, I tell people, is because I deal with, like I said, a lot of people who have never exercised before. I say walk 45 minutes every night. That's the beginning phase. Cut your sugar down. Look at what you're intaking sugar-wise. Start taking the sugar out. Start walking, and figure out what your goals are.
Would you recommend them cut out sugar completely away when their body's used to it?
No, I never do that. I actually teach tapering sugar off. There's some books out there that do like a 21-day detox, 30-day detox, which it does work for certain people. And those books, I'm sure, I haven't read them in a long time. I can't even remember how they teach it. If you're looking for a quick detox, there's people who can do it, but I have found that usually doesn't work for most because it's very painful. There's two things in our lives that act as heroin and cocaine in the same dopamine release in our brain: earning and spending money, and sugar. Get that one. Those are the two.
Well, I want the first one, earning and spending money.
Yeah, that's the one we should be aiming for, not the sugar part. But
I want that high.
99.9% of Americans shoot for the sugar high. So I tell them taper off the sugar and do it in slow increments. I say 25% basically a month, every 30 days. Try and cut 25% out, because most Americans are over consuming sugar by about anywhere from 5 to 10 times the recommended amount that you should intake. Because remember, there is sugar in nature. Vegetables have sugar, fruit has sugar, obviously, and actually meat carries glycogen, which is sugar, stored sugar. So there's sugar in nature. It's just we overconsume it and mainline it like heroin. That's what we do. So I say start there and just slowly get into it if you're a beginner. Now, obviously, if you've worked out before and you're in a different stage of your life and you're looking to take it up another notch, I'll let Dave cover that. But in the beginning, those are my basic 3 steps to focus on. Have a plan, figure out what your goals are, start reducing sugar, and start walking. And people go, well, that's stupid. And I go, you'd be surprised the results I've had with that and how many people in this country don't do that at all. I mean, have never done that. And you're like, well, there you go. There's where you should start. And what it does is it makes them look at their foods and what the sugar content is. And that means not just sugar, carbohydrates, because carbohydrate is converted into a sugar. That's what a carbohydrate is. So you got to pay attention. It makes you look at stuff and go, oh yeah, I was eating this low fat, whatever. Oh, there's 86 grams of carbohydrate and 50 grams of sugar per serving. Huh. Usually in their latte in the morning. That's where they get it. You see these McDonald's coffees? Those things are loaded with sugar. They're nothing but they're a coffee milkshake is what I call it. And people pay attention. They go, oh my God, I'm ingesting all the sugar for basically 3 days in one drink. I've just consumed a ton of sugar. And that's how I tell people, start focusing in on sugar first. And then you can kind of taper into, if you want to, obviously buy my books because they're outstanding. They're great, my Primal Power Method books, but they're a great starting point. And that's why I tell people, I should add the next one in.
I got it right on the show.
See, there you go. Education. If you're not willing to learn about your body, learn about nutrition, learn about health, no one can help you. You have to help yourself first. You have to have the basic knowledge of how the human body works. And I'm not talking becoming a molecular biologist or becoming, go and get your master's in chemistry.
Well, I had to learn the basic facts.
You have
I had to educate myself on the basic facts. I never would have done this.
No, and you'll never finish it. Most people will follow something because they want to be spoon-fed. Once the spoon feeding ends, they go right back up because they never learned. And I have 5 key principles in my book that I teach. And the first one is knowledge is power. That's the very first one I teach. If you do not understand what the hell you're doing, you're wasting not only your time, but if you're working with their time too. It's anything in life. If you don't have the knowledge, you're just a drone following something. What's the point? So go ahead, Dave. What would you recommend after that?
Whew, that was long-winded.
Whew, I know. Dang.
Well, it's pretty parallel to that, really, because if you're really serious, the framework for how you go about it has to be thought as subtle but cumulative changes. Slow strength gains, slow muscle gains. If you're doing a cut phase, subtle calorie deficits as opposed to just dropping them way down. So it all has to be subtle but cumulative. And if you follow that, you can build your metabolism over time. And I think that what happens when people want a starting point is that I want to give so much to him. Gary wants to give so much to him, but it's like there's no way to say, here's a flash drive, download my brain. And so sometimes the best answer really is, go check out my book. So with Gary, I kind of see that show up in him too, is it's like, I know you want to say so much and I want to say so much, but at a certain point, we can give you 3 to 4 things to get started, but really to get in a good system and just start becoming a student of it is a smart thing, and have some kind of a plan that you're following, because most people just aren't specific with their goals, all the way to the point of like people that do, okay, I'm going to lose some fat, and they don't have a closed-ended date on when they're going to, stop that cutting phase. So what I like to do is I like to get real specific with goals. If I onboard a client, I'll say, well, once I determine I think their metabolism is pretty decent and they can cut, I'll say, well, let's kind of map some stuff out. Like what do you got going this summer? Do you have a cruise? Do you have a wedding? What month do you like to be the leanest? And they'll say, well, I do have a wedding on, August 1st. I'm like, well, and it's hot that time of year too. That's a good time to be lean. Let's make August 1st like your leanest date. And then you map out the dates and you go, okay, that's 20 weeks away or whatever it is. And I'm going to sort of go maintenance or build until that. And then set out, a plan of 12 to 16 weeks of, okay, now I'm cutting, and have a closed date to that. Because people, if they go, I'm just going to cut forever and be miserable, that's too much sometimes. Yeah. And also adherence, and this is, maybe we can end on this, adherence is king to the plan. So if you start the wrong plan and you can't follow it, that's not good. What I've seen is when you get more specific with your dates, the adherence goes up. So if someone sets, 12 weeks or 90 days to cut, and they know what that end date is, if they miss one day of following their plan, they lost 1/90th of their chance. And you can only do that so many times. What most people do is let's move it back. I still got time. Pretty soon, all of a sudden, it's fall again, and they're like, oh, I didn't get lean this year again. I'll try next year, you know what I mean? Now the holidays are here. People get caught up in that. So I'd say get specific with their goals and start building good habits and keep learning. And if you're at a beginner level, I'm just going to be real, you won't get it right first time. You're going to mess up and be like, I could have done that better, and you will learn so much. Like my clients do 1-year program, and around month 6 to 9, depending where their knowledge is at the start, they start going, David, I freaking get it now. I wanted this pretty little package of all the information. You know, people say, I know what to eat, but I just don't do it. And when I hear people say that, what that means is they really don't know exactly what to do, but they know a few things. And a lot of times those people either go, well, it must be my body or my metabolism, and then they just kind of give up. But the ones that go buy a book, they simply just get a book, read it, your book, my book, and actually learn this stuff. It's like, whoa, okay, there's all these things I should have known and I didn't. And it's just sitting there in the books waiting. So if you become a student and you go, hey, you know what, subtle but cumulative in your mind, as opposed to hot off the start, you know, wait until you burn out, adrenal fatigue, stress goes up because of calorie deficits, that doesn't work. So think subtle but cumulative, and read Gary's book or read mine, I think is really a good start.
Well, don't just read. I recommend too, I've read hundreds of books on health. I mean, I've read them forever, but I don't recommend that for beginners. I recommend pick a handful that you think are related, interrelated, that will work well together. Because like I said, you get down too many rabbit holes, and you're going to screw it up. I guarantee it. The first time you go around, you're going to make some mistakes. That's why I wrote my books, though. I wrote them as reference materials. So that way you could go back. Because what would happen with me is I would have to tell someone, they'd ask me a question, an hour later, I haven't worked out. You know, I'm stuck in the gym and I'm all, oh, crap, I got to go. And then I'll see them the next day and they go, you know, you told me this, I didn't remember. You know, and after a while you go through it and through it and through it. And I went, I got to write this down. I got to put this in books. And people think I'm blowing them off. I'm not blowing you off. I only have so much limited time in my life, and I can't spend most of it explaining my concepts to people. I'm not being a jerk. That's why I wrote the book. It's there. It's all this accumulative information that I've learned over 3+ decades. It's all in there. It's short. It's easy to follow. That's why I say go read my book. It's not to make me a multi-billionaire, because I'm not.
And for Gary, you can go to primalpowermethod.com and check out his stuff there. And David, I've been looking at your website, davidshawn.co. Great information there. Where else can they find you as far as Twitter and Facebook and stuff like that?
Believe it or not, I don't do any social media. I got what's called my Sustainable Transformation Insider Circle. And so if you subscribe to my newsletter, you get all the content and you're in, but I don't really do social media, which I know that's like, you know, you don't see that these days, but I got a newsletter and, you know, I get referrals and I do interviews and stuff, but no social media for me. Maybe I don't like social media and maybe I get distracted too easy. I'm not sure which it is, but davidshawn.co is the place to find me. And if you subscribe, you will automatically get just enter your name and email, a free copy of my book. It's called The Beginner's Guide to a Sustainable Body Transformation. So what I did when I wrote that, I had to leave out a lot of the big complicated stuff. You know, I was writing it, I'm backspacing like, that's too complicated. Because if somebody's at square one, where do you start? So I thought, man, in 1998, when I started really getting serious about working out and everything, because I had some health issues, I put myself in a frame of mind where I said, what if I, for the last, 19 years, if somebody could give me a manual, I know nothing, A to Z, on really where to get started. So that type of person, I'm going to write it for them. And so that's the audience I chose to write to. Leaving out some of the complicated stuff, you know what I mean? Just starting with the basics, and here's some stuff that can really help you. So like I said, whether you go Gary's route or my route, you're going to see a lot of the same things show up, and you're going to learn more cool stuff. You're going to learn more cool stuff than you think a lot of times when you open that book up too. So
cool. We really appreciate your time. I think this was good information for me, and I'm sure everybody that's listening, if you stuck through this far, you're really interested in what it is. So, I mean, you're going to definitely benefit from it. You go on his website, he's got a picture of him right on the front. Obviously, he knows what he's talking about from a personal level, and his transformations down at the bottom. There's some amazing things going on there. As far as us, we do social media, of course. So follow us on Twitter at Old Dudes Podcast, or on Facebook at Old Dudes New Tricks, and our YouTube page. Hopefully soon it'll be at Old Dudes New Tricks. So just go on YouTube and search Old Dudes New Tricks for the video portion of this podcast, and check out Gary's book right behind him, Going Off the Grid.
Different book.
Different book, yeah. So check it out about a completely different kind of lifestyle that Gary lives and he kind of preaches. So anything else, Gary, before we sign off here?
That's it, man. Just also make sure to subscribe to our, did you say subscribe to our YouTube?
Yeah, subscribe to our
and
YouTube
also
and Twitter. Friend us on Twitter.
And on our newsletter, we just put up where you can subscribe to our newsletter updates we'll be having. It's on the website at olddudesnewtricks.com. So go there and make sure to sign up to get our updates. But again, thanks, Dave. We'll have you on again. We'll get into some juicier topics, and hope everyone enjoyed it and get healthy. That's all I can say.
See you guys later.
See ya.